Zelensky ratcheted up the rhetoric because Trump cut the theater of war just when Kyiv is trying to turn every new Russian attack into pressure for more money, more weapons, and more commitment from the United States. On Monday, May 25, 2026, after the Russian offensive against Kyiv and Zelensky's public demand for new consequences against Moscow, the White House already had another message on the table. Marco Rubio stated on May 22 that peace negotiations are stalled and that Washington will only come back strongly if there is a truly productive conversation, not an empty meeting just to sustain headlines. That's when Zelensky freaks out in anger because Trump is not accepting the role of automatic financier of a war with no deadline, no clear goal, and no accountability for those asking for help. Trump already showed on May 8 that he can get concrete action when there is a clear objective, by announcing a 3-day pause and an exchange of 1,000 prisoners on each side. Now he halts the show, demands results, and leaves Kyiv facing a tough question. What was Zelensky trying to hide behind the emotional pressure? Why has the war become a constant demand on the United States? And how did Trump cut the theatrics without handing Washington over to Kyiv, Moscow, or Brussels? I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now you'll want to subscribe to the channel to stay well informed, real-time information with the best journalistic quality you've ever seen. With the standard of credibility, Milson Alves. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, stated on May 22 that the talks mediated by the United States between Russia and Ukraine have not been productive and are practically stalled. He said that Washington is ready to step in again if a real chance for constructive talks arises, but made it clear that there are no negotiations underway at this moment. This statement hit right at the heart of the theater of war. The White House no longer wants to take part in diplomatic theatrics just to keep the same machine running without any real results. Zelensky reacted strongly because he understood the message. Ukraine is still under attack, still needs air defense, money, and military support. But Trump changed the logic of the conversation. The American president is not offering a blank check for Kyiv to keep sustaining a war with no end in sight. He is trying to forge a path in which American aid comes with accountability, negotiation, and results. For Zelensky, this is tough because it dismantles the comfortable position of demanding full support while shifting the political responsibility for the war onto Washington. The new pressure became even greater after the Russian attack on May 24 against Kyiv and other areas of Ukraine. International reports indicate they reported a heavy offensive with missiles and drones, including the use of the Oreshnik missile, a hypersonic weapon that raised the alert about the escalation of the conflict. The Ukrainian capital had deaths, injuries, and damage to residential buildings, schools, a market, water infrastructure, and public areas. Zelensky's reaction follows the logic he has used since the beginning of the war. When Russia increases its attacks, Kyiv increases the pressure on its allies. But now there's a huge difference. Trump is not sitting in the White House to repeat the old policy of sending resources, pushing the problem forward, and letting Europe act brave while the United States pays most of the strategic bill. Washington's response has become colder, more direct, and more dangerous for the Ukrainian narrative. Trump had already shown on May 8 that he can still force movement when there is a concrete objective. On that day, he announced a 3-day pause between Russia and Ukraine with a prisoner exchange scheduled. Zelensky confirmed the American move and acknowledged that the humanitarian issue of the prisoners weighed on Kyiv's decision. Here's the detail. When Trump put something practical on the table, there was progress. When the conversation turned into demands without delivery, Rubio signaled that the United States would not remain stuck at an empty table. That's where Zelensky struggled. He panics politically. While Russia increases attacks, while negotiations stall, and while Europe condemns Moscow in speeches, Trump is testing who really wants a solution and who wants to use the war as a platform. The White House didn't end the American role out of weakness. It signaled that it will only come back in full force if there's a chance for a productive conversation, and not just another round of public pressure to extract concessions from the United States. Ukraine knows that this move changes everything. For years, Kyiv managed to maintain an almost untouchable position in the West. Any doubts about strategy were treated as a lack of solidarity. Any questions about money were seen as doing Putin a favor. Any request for negotiation was attacked as surrender. Trump broke through that shield. He's not saying that Russia is right. He's saying that the United States can't be dragged into an endless commitment without a clear goal and without political control. The pressure on Zelensky also comes from the fact that the war has entered a phase where each side tries to use fear as a tool. Russia uses missiles, drones, and threats to show strength. Kyiv uses the impact of the attacks to ask for more help. Europe uses strong statements to show unity. Trump uses pressure to separate those who want an agreement from those who just want to prolong the dispute. In this game, Zelensky loses the monopoly on the narrative because the White House starts looking at numbers, results, and limits. Rubio's statement in Helsingborg, Sweden, made this even clearer. The American government didn't say it would never mediate again. It said it is prepared to act when there is a productive opportunity. This difference is essential. Trump did not close the door to peace. He closed the door to stalling. For Ukraine, this sounds like a threat because it takes away from Zelensky the ability to turn every stalled meeting into proof of international support. Meanwhile, attacks continued over the past 24 hours in areas of Russia and Ukraine. According to local authorities cited by the international press, there were deaths in different regions, damage to infrastructure, and new signs that the conflict remains far from a lasting truce. This environment helps Zelensky to call for urgency, but it also reinforces Trump's argument. A war at this level cannot be managed by emotion, improvisation, and unilateral demands on the American taxpayer. Trump is cutting out the theatrics because he knows there's a difference between supporting an ally and funding a strategy with no way out. Military support may be necessary at specific times. Diplomatic pressure can be useful. Prisoner exchanges can save lives. But none of this justifies an automatic policy in which Washington just pays, Kyiv demands, Brussels gives speeches, and Moscow keeps attacking. The American president wants to impose political costs on all sides. Zelensky gets irritated because this change reduces his room to maneuver. He needs to convince the United States that American aid still has a concrete purpose. He needs to convince Europe that promises need to turn into real capability. He needs to answer to his own population after harsh attacks against Kyiv. And he needs to face Russia without being able to turn Trump into a hostage of the war. This is the point that dismantles the left's narrative. It was Trump who scared the system by saying that the war can't keep functioning as a theater financed by Washington. Now the next stage gets tougher for Kyiv. If Zelensky wants to keep Trump in the game, he'll need to present a more objective path with goals, guarantees, and a logic that makes sense for the United States. If Putin keeps escalating attacks, the White House may increase the pressure, but within its own strategy, without allowing itself to be swayed by shouting videos and emotional headlines. And if Europe wants to defend Ukraine until the end, it will have to prove it with resources, air defense, ammunition, and direct responsibility, not just with indignant speeches after each attack. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you truthfully informed every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe, and check the comments afterward to engage more with the Milson Alves community.